Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya Nasta Preshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from 11th Canto, chapter 18. We're going to be covering the last ashram at Varnashram system, the Sannyasa ashram. So, let's see, we have verses, I believe 12 or 13, is it? 12, starting from 12? 12 to 37. All right. So, what comes to mind when you hear the term sannyas or the renounced ashram, other than renunciation? Yeah. What else comes to mind? Is that what? Old. You say old? Old or bold? Old. Okay. Both, I guess. Bold and old. Yeah. What else comes to mind when you think of the renounced ashram? Taking boat across the ocean, yeah, like Prabhupada, yeah. Normally traveling, yeah. What else?
That they went through like different ashrams before that.
Yeah, they went to different ashrams before that. Anything else that pops up on your mind? Wisdom and respect, yeah. Deep. No nonsense. Saffron, yeah. Saffron comes to mind. Anything else? Yes, bro. Really happy, yeah. Okay, that's a new ashram. sometimes you just think old and grouchy. I'm renounced, and away from society. But actually, yeah, self-realized persons. Yeah, they can be jolly like a child. Yeah. What else? Anything else?
Just kind of float around.
Yeah. Yeah. The floaters, yeah. And there's orange floaters. What else? Anything else? All right. So as we go through these verses, yeah, it just describes the ashram and how what a sannyasi does. And so as we go through this, pay attention to the different things that a sannyasi does, and and to see what principles there are that a sannyasi is supposed to follow. And every ashram, I think we were talking about yesterday, probably pretty much this thing, how there's different phases of life, and each phase supports each ashram, and so every ashram has its challenges and has its boons and pains. So there's certain challenges that come in each ashram, but with those challenges come a certain strength, a certain boon basically that helps us come closer to Krishna. And this is a system that's set up by Krishna actually. Originally, it's not just some social order that was come up with. Is when you study I remember studying philosophy in a philosophy class in college, and they were talking about how there's these different philosophers a few hundred years ago, and they came up with what's a social contract, and what is private land, and what is this. They defined everything. So it's not like some philosopher just came up and defined what are these different varnas ashrams. No, it's actually established by Krishna himself. So it's something that's supposed to be followed by the human population in general, especially these different ashrams. And you'll also notice yourself, like as we go through different phases, it's best, it's best to be a student when you're younger, it's best to then, get married and have kids later, and then it's best to then kind of get detached from all that after a certain point. And you'll see that, and I think you were talking about yesterday, like how people have midlife crisis. And so even in the regular world, people do go through these phases. It's just like a very diluted version of the diluted and very perverted version. If not perverted, it's like a materialistic version of the varnashram system. People do retire after a certain point, but then Prabhupada saw these older men playing golf one time, and then they were driving by, and he saw them from a distance, and then he asked the devotees, what are they doing? And they said, there's this game, you hit the ball with a stick, and the aim is to get the ball into the hole. I said, okay. And they kept driving, and then one of the devotees looked back, and then he saw Prabhupada was actually crying, had tears in his eyes, and they were like, what happened, Prabhupada? Why are you crying? And he said, they're just simply wasting their retirement time, their old age, and hitting the ball with a stick and putting it in the hole. Well, I don't know if he said that, but basically, they're wasting their time. There's this time where people retire, and so that, but the beauty of it is that, okay, now you're retired, and now you can focus more on Krishna consciousness and not so much on building wealth and running a household or so forth. All right. So let's do the verses. We could start from here. We can just go like that, and then after that we'll go to verse number 29.
If the Vanaprastha, understanding that even promotion to Brahmaloka is a miserable situation, develops complete detachment from all possible results of fruitive activities, then he may take sannyas, the sannyas order of life.
Having worshipped me according to scriptural injunctions, and having given all one's property to the sacrificial priest, one should place the fire sacrifice within oneself. Thus, with the mind completely detached, one should enter the sannyas order of life.
This man taking sannyas is going to surpass us and go back home, back to Godhead. Thus thinking, the demigods create stumbling blocks on the path of the sannyasi by appearing before him in the shape of his former wife or other women and attractive objects. The sannyasi should pay the demigods and the manifestations no heed.
If sannyasi desires to wear something besides a mere kupina, he may use another cloth around his waist and hips to cover the kupina. Otherwise, there's no emergency If there is no emergency, he should not accept anything besides his danda and water pot.
A saintly person should step or place his foot on the ground only after verifying with his eyes that there are no living creatures, such as insects, who might be injured by his foot. He should drink water only after filtering it through a portion of his cloth, and he should speak only words that possess the purity of truth. Similarly, he should perform only those activities his mind has carefully ascertained to be pure.
One who has not accepted the 3 internal disciplines of avoiding useless speech, avoiding useless activities, and controlling the life air can never be considered a sannyas merely because of his carrying bamboo rods.
Rejecting those houses that are polluted and untouchable, one should approach without previous calculation 7 houses to be satisfied that which is obtained there by begging. According to necessity, one may approach each of the 4 occupational orders of society.
Taking the food gathered through begging, one should leave the populated areas and go to the reservoir of water in a secluded place. There, having taken a bath and washed one's hands thoroughly, one should distribute portions of the food to others who may request it. One should do this without speaking. Then, having thoroughly cleansed the remnants, one should eat everything on one's plate, leaving nothing for future consumption.
Without any material attachment, with senses fully controlled, remaining enthusiastic and satisfied in the realization of the Supreme Lord and his own self, the saintly person should travel about the earth alone. Having equal vision everywhere, he should be steady on the spiritual platform. So far, what are some principles that have stuck out to you? What are some principles that a sannyasi follows? Aloofness, yeah. Yes, kind of detached and aloof. What else? Yeah, simplicity, yeah. That kind of common theme from Vanaprastha stage and from Brahmacharya, of course, as well. Fixed regulation, yeah.
Cleanliness.
Huh?
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness, oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. There was one more where he doesn't. Yeah. Yeah, I never really heard that before, but it says about how it should step or place his foot on the ground only after verifying with his eyes that there are no living creatures such as insects who might be injured by his foot. Can you imagine just doing that every step?
Yes, and underlying all of those is a lot of internal cultivation, which supports those things, because otherwise it's impossible to remember so many different things.
Yeah, it's not. These are not just rituals. And they're actually principles, deeper principles that are based on Krishna consciousness. And I was thinking this one specifically, the non-violence one, is that, and a correlated principle is compassion. A sannyasi has a lot of compassion for others who are who might still be struggling in the material world, and so he has so much compassion from little insects to human beings as well. What else? Anything else?
You definitely have to be in a state of Krishna consciousness so you can activate just be in these moments so see living souls and everyone be compassionate, see the love of living souls. So just by being in a state of Krishna consciousness, he's performing that.
So being in a state of Krishna consciousness.
The one Robert read, the only one I remember, there was 3 things. The only one I remember is the breathing, and for us, we do that during japa. And there was 2 other principles too that we follow. But
the life air that we balance.
And there was 2 other items, but those are automatic, kind of what we do. Oh,
that reminds me of a verse from the Nectar instruction, actually. Anyone remember?
Also, he lives by begging and doesn't collect.
Yeah. So
totally reliance on the Lord for his supply.
So not a detachment, And so anyone remember the verse from the Nectar instruction?
which is kind of related to controlling the senses and yeah, Vacho Vegan. Yeah, do it together. Vacho Vegan, Manasa Krodha Vegan, Iva Vegan, Udara Pasta Vegan, Itan Vegan, Udan Sheda Magha, Sarvam, Sashishyam. No translation? Oh. Here's the mic. Can't hear you.
A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of the senses, and the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world.
Yeah, so it's very similar to what it's saying over here. And yeah, once your tongue is controlled, then there's a lot less useless speech. So yeah, sometimes we often think that controlling the tongue means not to eat too much, but also actually the other aspect of not having useless speech. But yeah. All right. That's good. Oh yeah.
Three rods and the sannyas there. There's actually 3 sticks in there.
Here's my.
The danda, that stick that the sannyasis carry, there's actually 3 bamboo rods in there, and the idea, it's called Tridandi Sannyas, and the idea is that it represents that your mind, body, and words should be engaged in the service of Krishna. That's what I heard anyway.
Yeah, thanks, bro. All right. Anything else before we go ahead? All right. Okay. Next verse. Okay. Go ahead.
Dwelling in a safe and solitary place, his mind purified by constant thought of me, the sage should concentrate on the soul alone, realizing it to be non-different from me.
By steady knowledge, a sage should clearly ascertain the nature of the soul's bondage and liberation. Bondage occurs when the senses are deviated to sense gratification, and complete control of the senses constitutes liberation.
Completely controlling the 5 senses and the mind by Krishna consciousness, a sage, having experienced spiritual bliss within the self, should live detached from insignificant material sense gratification.
The sage should travel in sanctified places by flowing rivers and within the solitude of mountains and forests. He should enter the cities, towns, and pasturing grounds and approach ordinary working men only to beg his bare sustenance.
One in the Vanaprastha order of life should always practice taking charity from others, for one is thereby freed from illusion, quickly becomes perfect in spiritual life. Indeed, one who subsists on food grains obtained in such a humble manner purifies his existence.
One should never see as ultimate reality those material things which obviously will perish. With consciousness free from material attachment, one should retire from all activities meant for material progress in this life and the next.
One should logically consider the universe, which is situated within the Lord, and one's own material body, which is composed of mind, speech, and life there, to be ultimately products of the Lord's illusory energy. Thus situated in the self, one should give up one's faith in these things and should never again make them the object of one's meditation.
A learned transcendentalist dedicated to the cultivation of knowledge and thus detached from external objects, or my devotee who is detached even from desire for liberation, both neglect those duties based on external rituals or paraphernalia. Thus, their conduct is beyond the range of rules and regulations.
Although most wise, the Paramahamsa should enjoy life like a child, oblivious to honor and dishonor. Although most expert, he should behave like a stunned, incompetent person. Although most learned, he should speak like an insane person. And although a scholar learned in Vedic regulations, he should behave in an unrestricted manner.
All right, 1, 2, 3, start. Everybody.
A devotee should never engage in the fruit of rituals mentioned in the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, nor should he become atheistic, acting or speaking in opposition to the Vedic injunctions. Similarly, he should never speak like a mere logician or skeptic, or take any side whatsoever in useless arguments.
What else? Any other things that stick out to you? What a sannyasi should do? Principles or practices? The last one. Yeah. The ones we just read. Yeah. Don't do any karma kanda stuff, any fruit of rituals. And the beginning, any room from the beginning. Let's see. Yeah. I think it's still the section
like a
still
child.
talking, even though I don't know why it says devotee, but it's still talking about sannyasi though. What's that?
It says that Paramahamsa should enjoy life like a child, wherever that was, and not being attached to honor or dishonor.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, it is. I don't know, I feel like kids are still attached to a little bit of to honor, dishonor, but yeah, but like maybe like a really little kid. Just jolly little kid, yeah. Childish, yeah. I don't know.
So when you get old, like old people,
Oh yeah.
it's kind of like, like we say second childhood.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you enter into this phase of like, it's like you're mature, but at the same time you're innocent. And especially sannyasis, they become very like innocent.
Yeah.
Because they're just not involved in anything, that's contaminating or corrupting or degrading at all. So you just kind of like, like it said in another verse, like very blissful and carefree.
Yeah.
Like a child in that sense.
Yes, like when Prabhupada came to the West and he stayed at Sally Agarwal's house and he was curious about everything, everything that was new to him, which a lot of things were new to him from in America. So he was, she took him to the laundromat. So he had never seen laundry machines before, washing machines. So he was curious about that, and then he was very curious about the frozen vegetables. He would ask a lot of questions, and so he was very innocent. Like, yes, bro.
This verse is a good example of how one should not be too much of a literalist and trying to understand verses from the Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures. If it says that even though he's very learned, you should speak like an insane person, that doesn't literally mean just incoherently ramble a bunch of nonsense. It probably, if I had to guess, it probably just shows that the Paramahamsa, just like an insane person, is kind of his consciousness is in a different plane of reality to this mundane realm that most of us are functioning in. And probably when a Paramahamsa speaks, for most people, it might seem a little otherworldly. It's probably indicating something like that instead of, literally like a insane person, drug addict on the street or whatever.
Yeah.
Also, like, it makes me think that Paramahamsa is never showing off. Like, although he is like scholar and he like knows everything, unless he is like required to speak for the benefit of others, he does not like show off his knowledge. And on the point of like behaving like a child, like last week when there was a event with Radhanath Maharaj and Chandramani Maharaj, we could see like how their friendship, if eventually the video goes on YouTube, we'll see like how they were making jokes about each other and just laughing like boisterously. And at the end, after everyone had left, Chandramani Maharaj, just after Prasadam, he was like, let's do Kirtan. And he did Kirtan for like an hour and a half. And then he wanted to do like comedy. He was just sitting down and telling us all the jokes like he knows, like for sit down comedy for like half an hour. And like, I remember another one. And he would say another joke. And so he was just like such a jovial person, like a child, because he had no like worries about external judgment. He was just happy.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
I see a few like catch-22s and paradoxes, like
To use your desire to not want liberation or use your smarts to not appear smart, but to appear insane. They're almost like yes, no, yes. So you appear to be the opposite of what you are. It's almost like you're living in this neutral stage. And to accept donations, you have to be pure. Otherwise, I think guilt comes in. You're taking people's charity, then using it for something other than Krishna consciousness, leads to entanglement. So there's a lot of, from what I see, the trickiness of Krishna is like, yes, you're smart through study, but don't use it. Don't appear to use it for egotistical reasons. Because anybody that appears like they're talking smart, everybody's just like, yeah. But it's more of a child's mood where you can learn more from a child just through his play compared to him like rambling scripture. There seems to be a lot of parallels. Each text is full of stuff, but I really like that. Like, it's like, yes, do that thing, but don't do it too much.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. That's it.
I think of how both children and an insane person have no real social filter. They're just authentic. And an insane person will act according to how they perceive reality, which is usually not reality. So they don't really have a filter. And I think this is kind of what's meant by not allowing behavior to be restricted. In other words, you just act spontaneously and sincerely.
Mike?
I was thinking about number 24 and how contrary that is to everything Prabhupada has done.
Oh, yeah.
And it almost kind of make me to conclude that this is in relation to Mayavad sannyas. The Mayavad sannyasis, they don't like to mix. They don't like to go and mix with ordinary.
Or just impersonalists, I guess. Impersonalists.
Yeah, impersonal sannyas. Yeah, it seems like it's referring to that because we see that our present sannyasis, as Prabhupada is introduced, not only we don't shy away, but we go straight to where, and it's according to Prahlad Maharaj's teachings as well.
Yeah, it's for impersonalists also, like it's a whole, and also this is when Varnashram was set up, it's a whole different society now, and it's evolved over the times. And then now, not especially Prabhupada's time, Bhaktisiddhanta. Actually, for the longest time, I don't even know even if there was saffron sannyas in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition at all. I think it was just all Babajis, those who were renounced, they would just wear white, like how you see Bhakti Vinod and Gorka showed us. And it was Bhaktisiddhanta who, saffron sannyas normally was more in the impersonalist line. I think mostly in the impersonalist line. And but in Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we had the Babaji outfit. But with Bhaktisiddhanta, he took the saffron sannyas and started that. At least in Vaishnavism history.
I wouldn't say that these verses are for Mayavadi sannyasis because, after all, it's the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Bhagavatam, the whole subject is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God. So, but it's just, this was a long time ago. This was like 5,000 years ago. And this idea of sannyasis preaching and going into cities, and that started mainly with Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya sort of took things to the streets, and that's why he was criticized. Like, why are you behaving like this? This is not what sannyasis do. Sannyasis associate mainly with sannyasis and study Vedanta, and they stay aloof from ordinary people. So this was kind of the standard for sannyas. And we see also with Shukadeva Goswami in the Bhagavatam that he was a personalist at that point, but still it's described how he would just wander, he would wear nothing, like described here, danda and water pot only, and he would visit, he would go to the house of the grihastas just long enough to They could milk a cow, give him a cup of milk, he'd drink it down and leave. And in the meantime, he would tell them something about Krishna. But he wasn't like on a preaching mission. He was internally absorbed.
Yeah, that's a good point. That it was these verses are kind of in a different same role, different times or different society even. But after in the modern times, and that's why I was mentioning how Bhaktisiddhanta, it was more so like sannyasis do go and preach. But back then, even though they are devotees, not necessarily that they're impersonalists. But just back then, that's what sannyasis did. Is traveled, and especially like in Satya Yuga, there was not like those times. There was not a whole lot of need to preach like there is the need right now. So
just to clarify what you just said, I meant in principle. It seems like it's a kind of impersonal principle, not to mix and to avoid the way we travel But there are different times. I didn't mean to say there was no Vaishnava sannyas at that time.
Right. Another point is that like sannyasa in the Vedic culture is like sannyasa is from age 75 on. So it's literally like it's a time where you're not like in the classical sense. It's not when you're basically preparing for death. Your focus is turning inward. It's more of an internal meditation. It's about just being totally aloof from everything that's going on, not engaging with people except absolutely necessary, just to feed oneself, begging at 7 homes and leaving. So, and I was reading also another place in the Bhagavatam that the sannyasi, they said that for a sannyasi, the most glorious death is to just wander into the forest somewhere and just lie down on the ground and leave one's body, and that no one knows. The glorious death for the sannyasis is that no one even knows that you left your body because you just wandered in the forest and left like that in solitude. So it's a very different culture, than it was just like, I have nothing to do with this world. I'm on my way out. I'm already checked out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he wanted to go to.
So Lord Chaitanya totally changed everything when he came. He just like totally turned the varnashram, the whole system upside down, and established preaching of the holy.
I mentioned the teachings of Shri Prahlad, so he also kind of
back then,
he kind of chastises that mentality of not caring for others and going into the forest or a mountain. So he's a Mahajan, not a sannyasi, but great Vaishnava. So in principle, sannyas can be. That's my point. In principle, sannyas can be a little bit impersonal. So just a caution.
Yeah, it's like one can be kind of a loner, but not best for this age to be just by yourself. Robin's you gonna approve?
Came to these verses that we read about the solitude and avoiding social interaction, I actually thought of Mahavishnu Swami, who spends a lot of time with many different people every day of his life practically. Like he was in Times Square recently during the Rath Yatra time, and he's really mingling with ordinary working men and women, but at the same time he's more aloof than anyone. Like I think you would have to search far and wide all over India and different places to find sannyasis that are quite as detached and above the material energy as he is. But he's doing it in a completely different way.
Yeah, he definitely imbibes that childlike mood for sure. Yeah. All right, let's finish the verses before you have more discussion. I think at verse 30. One more point.
That point, I was just thinking that this sannyas, but I feel like there's also like Krishna conscious sannyas, and Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta introduced yukta vairagya to its fullest potential. So there's vairagya, which is renunciation, which I think is described in these verses. But there's also yukta vairagya, which is what Chaitanya propagated.
Sure, go ahead.
So this is when the scriptures say that sannyas is forbidden in Kali Yuga. It's this kind of sannyas.
I see. Yeah.
Because no one can do it.
Yeah.
They don't have the physical strength. They don't have the mental strength. They can't just live in solitude. So, but Vaishnava sannyas, the way that is practiced in our sampradaya, that's fine. For bhakti yogis, that can work because then Krishna is helping you. You have support of Krishna, you have association with the devotees.
Sign of a good class, a lot of discussions. God.
I was thinking like when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu he took sannyas from the Shankarites, I believe. Like it was
he
a
did.
personalist line
From the
because
Mayavadi
no
line.
one did that in Vaishnava Sampradaya.
Yeah.
And after that, like there were a lot of renunciates, like Narottam Das Thakur. I think he was also like he never married, but I think he was depicted as wearing white. He never took sannyas like that.
Yeah.
And then, so I'm just amazed that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was so bold. Like even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't do that. Like he did not like start like, oh, Vaishnavas will become sannyasis. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, but for the purpose of preaching, he just like said that we like Vaishnavas can take saffron and take sannyas and danda. And it's like just amazing how bold he was for preaching.
Yeah, he was. That's the role of the acharyas. The acharyas are ones, acharyas, the capital A, ones who can establish these things, depending on time, place, and circumstance. All right, I think we are verse 31. Yeah. All right, go ahead. Next question.
A saintly person should never let others frighten or disturb him, and similarly, should never frighten or disturb other people. He should tolerate the insults of others and should never think himself, He should tolerate the insults of others and should never himself belittle anyone. He should never create hostility with anyone for the sake of the material body, for he would thus be no better than an animal.
The one Supreme Lord is situated within all material bodies and within everyone's soul. Just as the moon is reflected in innumerable reservoirs of water, the Supreme Lord, although one, is present within everyone. Thus, every material body is ultimately composed of the energy of the one Supreme Lord.
If at times one does not obtain proper food, one should not be depressed, and when one obtains sumptuous food, one should not rejoice. Being fixed in determination, one should understand both situations to be under the control of God.
If required, one should endeavor to get sufficient foodstuffs, because it is always necessary and proper to maintain one's health. When the senses, mind, and life are fit, one can contemplate spiritual truth, and by understanding the truth, one is liberated.
A sage should accept the food, clothing, and bedding, be they of excellent or inferior quality, that come of their own accord.
Just as I, the Supreme Lord, execute regulative duties by my own free will, similarly, one who has realized knowledge of me should maintain general cleanliness, purify his hands with water, take bath, and execute other regulative duties, not by force, but by his own free will.
A realized soul no longer sees anything as separate from me, for his realized knowledge of me has destroyed such illusory perception. Since the material body and mind were previously accustomed to this kind of perception, it may sometimes appear to recur, but at the time of death, the self-realized soul achieves opulences equal to mine.
I think we'll skip the one who is, that's 37, right? We'll skip the verse for today. But what else? Anything else to stick out? Actually, let me just save some of the points I had before we have more discussion. But yeah, sannyas ashram, the ashram system builds up to sannyas, and it's crucial to go through these various ashrams, and the first one being the brahmacharya, where a lot of these principles that we're reading does exist in the brahmacharya ashram. There's simplicity, there's certain amount of aloofness and so forth from just what's going on in the material world, And so, but that lays the foundation so that when one enters Grihastha ashram, then they can use everything in Krishna's service with a certain amount of detachment. And that's the hallmark of sannyas ashram and even vanaprastha ashram, is that there's that detachment, that strong detachment. And has anyone ever felt like strongly detached at some point in your life? Anyone like to share? Yeah. probably self-detached. But yeah, like there's certain points, if Krishna is kind, then he'll arrange some incidents in our lives so that we feel strongly detached from a lot of things, if not everything. Yeah.
It's usually through suffering. So when my girl left me after 9 years, I was like, ultimately it turned out to be a good thing. But like in the beginning, I was just felt like I was walking through life and nothing was like, I couldn't hear people talk. I wasn't.
You basically became a sannyasi in
one day. The food didn't taste like food. It was just like everything just felt not real, like I was in a dream, and that lasted for a couple weeks, and I just felt very distant from everything going on. Traffic just seemed to be going by, and I would stand at the corner for an hour. I mean, that's an extreme example, but it felt like things were just moving by, and that wasn't.
Thanks for sharing that. But it's true that's the function of the material world, that it's supposed to make us a little bit more detached from our material desires, or if not fully detached from material desires. And and hopefully that keeps building gradually in our life to the point where we are mostly detached from material desires and just focus more on Krishna consciousness. And of course, it doesn't mean that one has to be totally detached before one can practice Krishna consciousness. Our main principle, the highest principle, is that we follow Krishna consciousness, and we worship Krishna and chant His holy name and so forth. And that's actually renunciation, knowledge, or byproducts of that. They're byproducts of bhakti. So it's not that we just focus on detachment and renunciation, but it just comes more naturally. But that is the function of this world, that to create some detachment. But the modern age is such that it makes us more attached to our material desires. And it's like the material system set up for detachment, but then people look at it like, no, we want to be attached. We want to make sure this lasts forever. So there's all kinds of things out there now, so that one is attached to the run-of-the-mill material life. But one time I was reading Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's biography, and somebody asked Maharaj that, should everybody take sannyas? And Maharaj said that everyone should take sannyas in their hearts. And for me, like what that means is that one should really, as a devotee, be dependent on Krishna. That is the essence of sannyas, that one is solely dependent on Krishna as one's maintainer. And so in one sense, one need not, even if one does not take on the saffron cloth, one can have that, can cultivate that mood that yes, actually Krishna is my maintainer, my provider, and so forth. And that is the main principle behind sannyas. So, and then with that principle, then one can go out and preach or do whatever, And even as grihastas, actually, when one starts cultivating that mood, then then there's a lot more detachment, and that's why grihastha ashram is there before sannyas, because sannyasis actually engage a lot of people and resources, especially in today's age, in Krishna service. So one has to go through the grihastha ashram, to just be trained in that ashram, how to be able to do that, and while being very detached. What else?
And going off Anthony's story there, I was thinking that he was saying how suffering brings about detachment. And it's related to what we were talking about yesterday about vanaprasthas doing austerity as a way of cultivating detachment from the world. Because when things are painful, when life sucks, it's like I don't want anything to do with this, right? You become detached naturally. But and then I was thinking about how we have the 4 regulative principles, and one of them is no intoxication. Each one of the regular principles, they're related to one of the pillars of religion. So no intoxication maintains the pillar of austerity, which is one of the principles. It's so important. So the thing is, what people generally do when they're in a situation where their partner dumped them, they're just totally like out of it. Yeah. They'll go get drunk, they'll take drugs, they'll just escape through intoxication. And so they deprive themselves of that wealth, of austerity, which can really give them a huge boost in spiritual life and just in wisdom. So intoxication is really bad. That's why I know intoxication, because we go through life sober, you experience the brunt of it. You experience the starkness of reality in this material world, that it's terrible. It's a place of misery. And then you're like, yeah, this is not where I want to be.
It's like you need both. You need the boot of Maya, and then you also need the knowledge and the love from Krishna. Because otherwise otherwise life is just hellish. You're just going through all this suffering and you have no idea what's about. One time I was, July 4th actually, that was a while, 10 years ago, I was helping with but it was a Rath Yatra, so I was setting up the books table at the National Mall in DC. And this was early in the morning, so we were just gonna set up and I was sticking around to keep an eye. And that's when an Indian man came by, and he was fairly young, and he came with his family actually. And then he told them, he told the family, keep walking. He said he wanted to talk to me. So he was talking to me about Bhagavad Gita, and then at one point he just started opening up, and he was like, life is so miserable, my my family demands all these things, and I try to provide, and I have H-1B visa, and I can't go to India, and he just was like, oh my, he was like, what's the point of all this? And I was like, here, read the Bhagavad Gita. I was like, that's an easy sell. But just that point being people go through so much, but either they get intoxicated or they just have no knowledge of what the purpose of human form of life is. So you need both the science and the nescience. You have to go through the nescience part, and then but you also need the positive reinforcement that actually the goal of life is to realize that we're servants of God and so forth. Okay. Did you have a connecting point?
Yeah,
okay. And
Advaita
and Rasika. Go ahead.
And then the more we kind of just accept the suffering, the more we just kind of embrace it and turn to Krishna, take shelter of Krishna, then the more Krishna just showers us with so much affection and that feeling of connection to reinforce the fact that, okay, this is not my place, but that is, that this is what I want to feel. This is where I want to be. So it's almost proportional. The more we suffer, the more mercy we get, as long as we just keep turning to Krishna.
Yeah, that's a great point, but it's so much worse than that. When we suffer, it's not just alcohol or the getting intoxicated. It's like everything else that sedates us to forget that this is a miserable place. It's entertainment, sports, so many distractions. People just want to forget. They just want to forget about and be in denial that this place is a miserable place. So the whole thing is programmed. It's like a big machine just to make you think, well, maybe I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I should, another girl or another relationship that it's bereft of sanity and God consciousness. And it just goes on. The show goes on. It's very sad.
And, it makes me think, I was thinking about it yesterday, it makes sense that, well, it doesn't make sense to people why people die. They're like, why is there death, and people dying? But it makes sense that it's there because people have to keep going through it, and hopefully they will realize the futility of it, or, so it's just like an endless loop of cycle where you have to learn your lesson. Yeah, Rasika.
And thinking of two Shastric thoughts that Queen Kunti talks about this principle in her prayers to Krishna when she says that only those who feel a level of material exhaustion will enthusiastically and sincerely seek Krishna. And she, so much so that she actually prays to him, please keep the suffering coming. In essence, that's what she says. And then also in Canto 7, Chapter 12, a great description is given, and Prabhupada's purports are quite poignant in this regard, that the progression of Varnashram is meant to bring us increasing detachment.
Thanks.
So practicing Krishna consciousness in the midst of each of those ashrams takes us where we want to go.
Talking about sannyas, so Prabhupada actually stated 4 different types of sannyas. And that clarifies the discussion because we say, okay, sannyasi should sit and meditate and not preach or should preach or whatnot. So there is a lecture of Srila Prabhupada in Canto 1, Chapter 8, verse number 45, and he's giving this lecture in October 21, 1974. And Prabhupada is explaining there 4 types of sannyas stages are there. The first one is called Kuti Chaka, and in that a sannyasi builds a cottage outside the home, and he can accept the food stuff from the home.
Yeah, that's the kind of sannyasa I'm going to do. Imagine. That's basically what I have right now, actually. Anyways.
Yeah, and then Bhudaka Sannyas, and then Parivrajagacharya. In the third stage, the Parivrajagacharya, the sannyasi is preaching from country to country. And the fourth stage, Paramhansa, the sannyasi sits and meditate, and he's going deeper within. So that's the 4th stage. So that kind of clarifies that.
Yeah. So yeah, there are actually 4 stages of sannyas. But yeah, yes, bro.
Meditation. I just remembered once I heard, in light what you said earlier, is that in this material world, what is there to be enjoyed? And in the spiritual world, what is there to be renounced?
So yeah, when suffering comes, or when we lose the love of our life in one way or the other, be it person or wealth or family or whatever else, then you just think, oh, this is Krishna's mercy. Somehow Krishna is increasing my detachment and really showing that love I was seeking from this particular thing or person is actually, I was seeking love for Krishna. So I just work towards that instead of trying to find love in so many ways. But yeah, that's the principle of sannyas that we see. We try to just basically depend on Krishna and try to increase our love for Krishna, and we really see that actually our hankering for so many things and on people is actually our hankering for Krishna. Yeah, and then just be gradually more detached from what we are getting and are not getting in this material world. But yeah, I stop here. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Everyone takes sannyas ki. In the heart.
Yajna